And now CRM Audio presents Captain Redlace's Power BI Corner with Business Solutions MVP Scott Sewell.
This episode of Captain Redlace's Power BI Corner is brought to you by our friends at KingswaySoft. KingswaySoft is a leading integration solution provider offering software solutions that make data integration affordable and painlessly easy. Thousands of enterprise clients from over 65 countries and regions rely on KingswaySoft to integrate data with various application systems in order to drive their business efficiency and fully leverage their information assets. KingswaySoft is a leading provider of Microsoft Dynamics integration software, including Dynamics 365, CRM, AX, NAV, GP, SL, as well as many other applications such as Marketo, Dropbox, QuickBooks, and Salesforce. Whether you need one solution or several, KingswaySoft works easily within the SSIS platform to make your integration process as quick and easy as possible. Many of their clients have seen 3 to 10 times greater data integration performance after switching to the SSIS integration toolkit. We thank KingswaySoft for their support of Captain Redlace's Power BI Corner.
Hi, Joel.
Hey, Scott. I'm usually the one that's supposed to say hi first. So,
well, I thought I'd switch it up a little bit. You know, the thing about this podcast that I enjoy is I never get to talk to you otherwise. This is the best time. I love getting to catch up with you. And then
I think that's a good point, and that's one of the reasons I podcast is because it makes me have time with my friends and the smart people I know, and it's a good thing. So if I didn't do this, I'd probably be busy working on something.
So it's a good way to avoid work. Is that what you're saying? So
well, yeah, or force myself to be sociable.
That's great. Yeah, and then combine it with the topics that you and I are both passionate about. Is about delivering value in CRM and Power BI, and it's fun to be able to talk and catch up.
Right.
We had a conversation recently about Power BI, the Power BI template dashboards that they've released.
Yeah. Episode 7, I think it was.
Okay. Yeah. And when we talked about it, we mentioned that the newest version of the Power BI dashboard, it was actually the original version of the newest one was released in December, and it's out. It uses a tool for getting data out of CRM that's fairly new to I think it was 2016 that it really was released. And the configuration between that and Azure is all handled by a wizard. And I thought we might talk about it a little bit and see what.
I think you called the export service.
Yeah,
I know there's probably people who have never heard about that. So yeah, what is that thing you're speaking of?
Yeah, so this thing I'm speaking of is it's called the Data Export Service. It was partially available in 2015 as a programming interface. And then in 2016, they released it as a combination of like an app inside a CRM. That the purpose of it is to allow, by configuring this app inside of CRM, along with the change tracking feature of CRM records, you can then, it will automatically synchronize data from CRM through this intermediate app into an Azure SQL table. Once you've got it configured, it's just and if you need to add a new entity, it's like 3 clicks, and it will start synchronizing that record over to SQL. One of the challenges with CRM online, especially if you're kind of an old timer, is you feel a little bit with your hands tied behind your back because you can't get the SQL tables to actually run reports on them. Or if you wanted to run a big report that uses a high volume of data, you want to have that data available for reporting on it. And in the this is a one way. If you can actually use this and configure this and set this up as a one way to get data out and into the SQL table, and then use something like KingswaySoft, which I would I have used this in conjunction with that and used Kingswaysoft to get the data back into CRM once I added updates to it or whatnot. So a lot of choices there. The cool thing about this is once it's up and running, there's no scheduling involved. It just fires on, it watches the change log inside of CRM for changes to individual entities, and as those entities change, it picks up the deltas, whatever either the inserts or updates, and pushes those changes over to this a SQL table that you configure inside of Azure. Works really nicely scalability wise. I mean, my conversations, they didn't tell me who it was, but they said that they have customers using it, pushing it with over 100 million records in there. So pretty useful in that case.
I'd like to see their CRM online storage costs.
Yeah, exactly.
100 million records.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So as far as what do you have to bring to make it work? Does it handle the setting up of the Azure SQL database, or do you have to bring a Azure SQL server with you to set it up?
Okay, so great question. If you want to start from scratch, the steps involved, and by the way, I'm going to shout out to Scott Durrow out of the UK, our hero. That's the developer of the Ribbon Workbench, which is invaluable for CRM. He did a video recently walking you through the steps of configuring it, and so there's that's just do a Google or a Bing on that, and you can find Scott Durrow talking about how to configure the data export service for CRM. Really helpful. But the basic steps are, inside of CRM, you go to the App Store and install the data export service app. It's a plugin that goes into CRM. It's a web. It's got I forgot what necessarily to call it, but it's a web app that runs inside of CRM. It has a configuration page, and it asks a bunch of questions. Well, Durrow actually goes through the process of setting up and telling you how to go find the answers to each of those questions. What you'll need is inside of and this is CRM 2016 online. I should point out. What you'll need is in the same tenant of Office. So if you can't mix this one with your production environment or where all your production CRMs are with a trial version of Azure. They need to be in the same login scope, right? So it can't jump outside of one set of one tenant and then to something that's completely different. It needs to be in the same tenant, which was a little tricky for me the first time I did it because I think I just probably I ignored that instruction. I was trying to do it the way I wanted to do it. Once it's in the same tenant, you got CRM Online sitting over here, and then you have your Azure subscription set up over on the other side, and you'll need to go through the steps of setting up a SQL server, an Azure SQL server in Azure, and a database in Azure, and this whole thing about a key vault. And this key vault is really, it stores authentication so that the app in CRM and Azure know that they trust each other, because you've explicitly said, I want this app to be trusted by Azure and vice versa, so that they can communicate. Once that's in place, once you get all those, and you have to put that URL into a CRM, get all these things configured, get all the wiring put in place that way. At that point, it will then, you can select an entity and say, I want the account entity or the contact entity or the lead entity, whatever. You can set those, and it's one choice. It's either on or off for those entities. You turn it on, and it will do an initial sync from CRM to Azure into that Azure table, and will create a corresponding table. You can do a couple things, like you can say which schema you want it to go into in Azure. You can configure that. You can tell it you want a prefix in front of the table names. Like one of the suggested ways would be to prefix all the tables as CRM, and it will prefix them all as CRM underscore something. And then those will be there, and then you can have additional tables that aren't from CRM in that SQL table, and mix and match and do all kinds of fun things and get the data back to CRM using SSIS.
Okay. So the former crusty solution architect inside me wonders how it will respond to wholesale changes, large, entity recreation, or you replace a text field with a bit field or something like that with the same name. Does it handle that kind of stuff?
It does. Shockingly, it does. When you make a change to an attribute inside of CRM, it queues up that change. It has plugins that run behind the scenes in CRM. It queues up that schema, that entity change. Like if you add a new attribute, it will queue that up, and it will push that change to the schema to Azure, and it will change that table, the target table in Azure, and populate that. And update the schema there. If you delete a table, it does the same thing. It deletes the corresponding field from the table. If you add a new entity, one of the things, if you add a new custom entity, you do want to make sure in the configuration of that entity you click the checkbox for change tracking, because it leverages that in order to know what the deltas are, right?
Okay.
So you check that box, and then you set it, say I want this to be a part of my synchronization, and it will create a corresponding table on the other side.
You finally have the Ron Popeil set it and forget it data.
Set it and forget it. Yeah, pretty close.
So let me ask you this question:
Yeah.
since you've done the alternative approach of the manual approach multiple times, is there any reason you would, or any scenario you can think of where you would still do a custom manual extract versus just using this?
Yeah. So if you're doing I would say for a custom extract, if you're doing something that's more batch oriented, or you didn't want, the other thing is if you don't want to put all this in SQL Azure, if you want to push it to a local copy of SQL on your, inside your firewall, yeah, you use a more manual process or a batch oriented thing with SSIS.
But this is really exciting for any kind of offline. Offline, but outside of CRM, reporting on CRM data.
Right. Because,
anytime you do more complex joins for SSRS reports, or that type of thing, as well as Power BI and other things, this is a really good thing to have.
Yeah, it sticks it up in Azure, and it's out there available. You can configure it so that the data, the SQL authentication only, you can configure firewalls on specific databases, so that you can have 5 databases that pull from 5 different sources or 5 different things, but one database sits out there and it has the firewall open to it, so people outside of your organization or outside the office can connect to that one, but if you're outside the office, you can't connect to the others. It's really, there's a lot of flexibility, and that just comes with Azure SQL. That's not
so what
environment.
What do you know, or what do you I don't think any of us really know, but what do you know about how this relates to the Common Data Service? Because it seems like if we have the dream of the Common Data Service, come true, where CRM and AX data are automatically going to this Common Data Service where you can report off of, why would you need this?
That is an excellent question, Joel. I don't know the answer to that.
I have stumped the captain.
Oh, right. You totally stumped me. Yeah, I've got.
This was kind of in the works, already when Dynamics 365 was announced, and so I'm wondering if they will somewhat come together, or if this will be the mechanism that's used. Because it seems like if you have something that uses the change tracking to keep a synchronized database, that's really kind of what we're talking about with the common data model, common data service too.
Right. I think you're going to see. I mean, last time I asked the question, I got a bunch of people going, "Yeah, I got the question about that. I've got a question about that too." And when the one person from the product team said, "Oh, you can use this to populate the common data service," and I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And then radio silence after that. So that's a question for a future episode that I'll come back and act like I've always known the answer to, but I don't know it right now.
Does it always go to one SQL database, or could I, for some reason, point it to two different SQL databases if I had two databases I used for different purposes?
Yeah, so inside the app, you create a profile, and for that profile connects CRM to a specific database. But you can have multiple profiles. So you could have one profile that just moves, we'll say, accounts and contacts to one area that's used for one purpose, and another profile that moves accounts, contacts, opportunities, and orders to another database. So multiple profiles can help divert that attention. But per profile, the profile is a combination of one CRM and one SQL target.
Okay. So that's cool. So you could do that. Now, the other thing I would like to be able to use something like this that I've seen scenarios for is a version of this that you could use for archive purposes. So when you delete stuff out of CRM, you're not deleting it out of there as well.
Yeah, in this case, the integration does, if you delete it from CRM, it will delete the corresponding record from this replica table. And it just leaves there's another table for deleted GUIDs, basically, and it just sticks a record in that said, for the lead entity, GUID, 32 characters, was deleted at this time and date. But it doesn't have a record of what was in that record before. So it's not, I wouldn't call it you can push these out, and then if you're replicating it somewhere else, you can just highlight the records that are deleted by looking at this delete log. But you're the record inside the sync area. If you delete from CRM, it's going to delete the corresponding record in the sync area.
Okay.
So not quite that. It's a the other. Yeah, it's a really nice feature, and it has a lot of usefulness. I'm using it. I wouldn't, and it is one way. It is coming from CRM to this outbound piece. So there's no, if you want to use something to compare that data and push it back into CRM, you're going to go back through. The back channel will be using SSIS with an adapter like Kingsway Soft, which would be my preference.
Okay. So unlike CRM on-premise database, there's no restrictions about using that database for other purposes, putting other tables in it?
No, that's great. That's a great question. In fact, in the Sales Manager dashboard wizard that Microsoft released for Power BI, there is a wizard in there. In fact, if you go to the PowerBI.com homepage and you go to Solutions and choose Solution Templates, just scroll down and you'll find one for Sales Management for Dynamics 365. You click on that, and then there's an Install Now button. The interesting thing about this is it goes through a 5-step wizard, and you start with the assumption that you have CRM Online and you have an Azure subscription in the same tenant. But if you have that, you can go. It will walk you through the whole process of setting up the keys, setting up the integration behind the scenes, choosing the entities that are used for this Power BI demo dashboard, and getting the syncing started so that the Power BI dashboard that they've released will connect to this SQL table offline. So it does all the stuff that Scott showed you how to do in the video. It does it manually. It does it via the wizard behind the scenes for you. which is really cool. It actually all sets up. The other thing it does in the Power BI, this wizard that sets this up in preparation for connecting the Power BI template to it, it goes ahead and configures views on top of the CRM tables. And Power BI is actually, instead of connecting to the table itself, it connects to the views associated with those tables, which is necessary because there are some replication items that don't flow over the way that you would flow over you would see them if you were looking like a filtered view. For instance, option set labels. Because option set labels are multi-language, the integer value comes over to the table in Azure, but the label does not show up in that table. The label is actually added to another table in Azure, so that when you want to query that, you can join those two tables together so that your labels are populated with whatever language you want to use. If you ever looked at the filtered views in CRM and you actually looked at the code behind it and you saw all this mess of code behind there, kind of doing the same thing, minus the security aspect of it.
How does it do with some of the pseudo entities that aren't really entities, but in that you can't get to sometimes through the front end of CRM online, such as activity party and things like email attachment? How does it do that if it's some of those things like activity party aren't really an entity?
Yeah, this is Stump the Chump again, isn't it?
I'm giving you things to research for our next episode, Scott. That's what I do.
Since I have, I am actually logged in right now. I was able to. I shouldn't have even said Stump the Chump. I'm looking at activity party as one of the entities that can be synced to the Azure table. So activity parties is there. Action cards as an entity, one of the new features there. Campaign responses, I don't know, it's quite a bit there. Anything else you can think? Gamified data markers.
What about the entity?
The entity.
The
entity map.
SQL, there's an entity view where if you want to see information on your entities, like which has the use on mobile box checked. I've done reports on that before.
Really? No, I don't see that. I don't see the entity.
Okay. Well, I don't want to talk about the limitations. As long as you get activity party and some of those that are
one of the other ones that you get, and
like opportunity product and quote product, and some of those that sometimes give
all
us
those fun quote product. I see quote product right in front of me. But the other things that you also see are tables like the principal object access table, the POA.
Oh, your favorite table?
My table, man, the POA. You can choose the POA, and I was talking to the team the other day about security items, some security questions, and they said, yeah, if you really need to get to a point where you're trying to recreate CRM security outside of CRM security, you can export this POA table and start working towards replicating it. In fact, if you want to use like the old filtered views as a guide, you can get as creative as you need to get. That could get pretty hairy, but since all this data, all these security tables are being replicated out, you could leverage that theoretically and build security into these replicated tables that would then sort of mirror CRM security.
Yeah, well, that's great that you have the option to get that too, because that then opens the door to doing some of the administrator type reports that we did with CRM on premises for people who want to.
Yeah, system user profiles, system user roles, all of those things. Team membership, team roles, all of those are in there.
Good stuff. This is good stuff, Scott.
Good. I'm excited. I'm glad to have some. I'm glad somebody else is excited about this as I am. I get too fired up, and my wife goes, "Yeah, whatever." And so I'm glad to have somebody else that gets excited about this stuff.
Yeah, it's just kind of like the final thing where where on-premise had the advantage of being able to access the data through SQL queries and other things like that we now makes it as easy as possible to do with Dynamics 365 Online as well. So, great.
Yeah, it's really useful. And I mean, again, it's not the one tool that does it all. It's not the universal fix, but it's really useful for some purposes. And I personally am using it in conjunction with SSIS to use. In my case, the SSIS is I'm using that to push it back into CRM. So well, it's cool. I'm very happy about it.
I didn't ask you what is the delay on it from when you make a change.
Oh, good question. They do not publish an SLA on purpose because it's not a batch, not a fixed interval. Some of it's going to rise, and the interval is going to rise and fall based on load. But they set an expectation that it's 15 minutes.
Okay.
My experience has been I've seen it in seconds, but I wouldn't put an expectation that says you're going to see this in seconds, because all of a sudden you get a big load of records hit, and it's going to take longer to get that out there. So they said, I don't know that they have a specific SLA, but they do try to set the expectation that you'll see it in under 15 minutes, but my experience is I'm seeing it in seconds.
Yeah. And if anybody says they need to see data in CRM more frequently than every 10 to 15 minutes, I really question what kind of data they're doing.
Right, and if you're needing to do that, you're probably looking at events that happened today, and why not just report directly off of CRM at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah, just go directly to CRM as opposed to waiting for
maybe you have a dashboard of bombs that need to be disarmed or something.
Maybe so. Good deal.
All right, so now I'm going to go export some data.
Carry on, man. This is good stuff. It's fun, and it's a whole lot of opportunity that's in front of us. And all this ties back to Power BI, because Power BI, once you export those 100 million records out of your dashboard, Power BI can just consume those in a heartbeat, and you can run reports left, right, and center off of the SQL table that contains CRM data in huge volumes as compared to trying to go 50,000 records at a time within CRM.